the Examiners, that I should mention. Some good stuff inside from Ronan O'Gara. Murray and Sexton's Ireland futures are separate debates, he says. And there's plenty more as well inside in relation to the rugby. And we might continue on that theme, Eoin, I think, in relation to Irish rugby and the selection process that we've had over the last few weeks. And exactly, I suppose, where all this is headed over the next while. Because it's a grimish picture, I think, for Irish rugby fans at the minute. We're not making the progress we want in the pitch, and we're not seeing maybe the selections that many fans would like to see. Now, hindsight is a great thing, but like Andy Farrell and his selection of Billy Byrnes at 10 against France, we spoke about it on this show this day last week with Alan Quinlan, and we asked him about, because it was widely speculated at that time that Byrnes would feature. Like, was this the right thing to do? Either a very brave move from Andy Farrell. He's putting his cojones on the table and he's saying, this is my guy. When Sexton is out, I'm going for Billy Byrnes, and that's exactly, for whatever the rationale was, exactly what he did. And then you look at the stack up options that are there. You have your Ross Byrne, obviously, who comes in early in the game and does well. You have Jack Carty. You've, not to mind, obviously, the younger players then, the likes of Harry Byrne and Ben Healy. You lads can take a ticket, because my guy is Billy Byrnes. Like, it's France, it's the Six Nations, and he's very much backing him as his number 2. Joey Carberry's return notwithstanding. But it did strike me as a pre-match, and I know it looks smarter now in hindsight, but pre-match, that it was an odd hill on which to pitch your flag. Like, I'm assuming that these are conversations that he's having with Mike Catt, and, that they're all in now on somebody who has big question marks. And again, against France, when he comes off, we're a better side when he's not there. I like the argument for starting with somebody else other than Billy Byrnes, and particularly bringing in some of the younger players, I think could never have been stronger than it was at the minute. Because, like, the argument that's always made about putting your best foot forward in all of these games and not taking any risks and going with a bit of experience over the younger players is obviously about needing to put bums on seats for the Six Nations and keep the coffers afloat. It's the Irish national team are the thing that keeps, we're told, the IRFU in business. But it's not a factor at the minute. It's not about keeping the public interested enough so that they're going to come to games. It's just not a factor this year. And I just think that the case for bringing in somebody, and I appreciate it looks smart ass now, or it looks hindsight at this stage, I think there was a really strong case to do it against France. I think putting in Billy Byrnes, he was saying, this is my guy. And now we read the quotes this morning of Farrell say, Farrell wary of blooding young players in Italy is the headline in the Irish Times. And I do find it, very deflating, to say the least, that, like, here we are again, whatever but against France, we're up against Italy, and we're all on the line now, because are we playing for a wooden spoon here? Probably. But he's talking about Harry Byrne in the papers today, is Andy Farrell, and he talks about him playing little rugby. He's saying that he's untested. Can't just guess that he's going to be okay, is one of the summations of one of his quotes. He's saying he's got a bad back. We've got to make sure they're ready, he says. But, like, the same wasn't true when you look at somebody like James Ryan a couple of years ago, who in fact made his Ireland debut in 2017 before he ever played for Leinster. And it's not also as if Harry Byrne, and I'm focusing in on him, but I mean, I think that there was a strong case for Ross Byrne to start. I think there was a strong case for Jack Carty, but to focus in on Harry Byrne, I just think that, like, you got to give youth its flourish. And I thought that last week was the time, and I believe next week is definitely the time.
You make a strong case. Just a couple of things there. First of all, on the James Ryan thing and the Six Nations as a whole, James Ryan made his debut against the United States in 2017. Italy aren't good, but it's a hell of a lot more important than a game against the United States in a summer tour. The fact that there's going to be nobody paying into the stadiums is almost as significant this season in terms of actually getting over the line and winning the games and getting prize money that the IRFU need. So this is why Ireland need to win their last 3 games. It doesn't necessarily mean that you go out and you suddenly throw away the future if that's what Billy Byrnes represents. But I don't think that that's the way Andy Farrell is thinking. I think that if you bet big on your backup 10 in week 1, which he did by picking him over Ross Byrne as your backup out half, then you kind of need to go all in on him in the second week. Otherwise, you kind of alienate that player, and he's sort of gone forever. It's going to be hard to bring that player back into the fold and try and give back the trust to the player. at least now he can make a far more educated decision on Billy Byrnes. He has seen him for as a starter, and he's seen him as a sub, and he's seen all the strengths that he can bring, and he's seen more of the weaknesses that he can bring to the table. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Billy Byrnes thing is sort of done, or at least he's kind of one step down on the pecking order, and Ross Byrne at least has leapfrogged him. What I don't understand is why someone like Jack Carty isn't in there. And in fairness, this isn't something that I was thinking about too much until we were chatting to Brian O'Driscoll this week, and he made the case for him. And it makes perfect sense in that he is an experienced out half who is playing really good rugby this season, who has a bit more spark about him than either Byrne or Byrnes currently does. And I think that is the happy medium between the not ideal situation that we've seen in the first 2 weeks and the Harry Byrne situation. Because really, Adrian, you can't honestly make the case that the Harry Byrne situation is ideal at the moment. As much as we all want to see him wear the green of Ireland and get onto a senior pitch, Andy Farrell has a point. Like we can't allow the excitement of youth to distract from the fact that Andy Farrell has a point when he says he has played about 95 minutes or 98 minutes in 10 weeks. 80 of those were a couple of weeks ago against the Scarlets. He's a guy that's been on the radar some time for us, but he's been unbelievably stop-start and he's had a bad back. Like, those are all factors to not give a player his first full Ireland cap. It might actually be enough to not give a guy a first full Ireland cap in a game against the United States. It is definitely a reason not to do it in a game against Italy in the Six Nations, in a game that probably Ireland need to win. And Andy Farrell has said earlier this week that Ireland need to win, and they need to win their next 3 games, and they need to finish off this Six Nations on a good note. There is an element of risk about Harry Byrne, fitness-wise and in terms of getting up to speed and whatever the game plan is. And he says that we can't throw in any kid by just guessing. If it's going to be guesswork and they feel that there is enough of a plan that exists in this Ireland team that you can't throw in any kid and guesswork, then I think fair enough, to be honest with you. I want to see the kid in there ASAP, but there are enough reasons to suggest that actually he's not the ideal pick for the Italy game.
I'm of the view that, like, so this conversation comes up so regularly, and the answer is always that now is not the right time. And my view is simply that if now is not the right time, then whenever will be. Like, it's never going to be. If it's against Italy in the Six Nations in a year that there's not going to be any fans in the stadium, now has got to be the time. And in terms of guesswork, like, I'm a bit flabbergasted by the Harry Byrne thing. And, like, yes, you're right that he hasn't played a lot over the last little while. And by the way, thinking about it ahead of this chat, I you know, and I know that you've been reading Ronan O'Gara as well in the Examiner this morning, and feel free to give the summary of what he was saying. But, like, I was definitely of the view that maybe one of the mitigating factors that Andy Farrell can't necessarily talk about too much is that maybe if Conor Murray was playing, maybe that was a stronger case to have a Harry Byrne in there, because you had a wise old head, you had that bit of experience, you had somebody maybe above any of those things who could actually run a game in a way that a French nine might, if things went to pot for you a little bit, like a real sort of old hand of experience there in a way that Jameson Gibson Park just wasn't going to be. And maybe that fed into it. But I think in terms of guesswork, like, it's not new news that Harry Byrne is a real talent, and, like, it's doing him a disservice to say that this has been a brand new conversation. Like, there's been talk of Harry Byrne into the Ireland team for a while, obviously enough that Andy Farrell himself thinks something of him to bring him in and have him about the training sessions or whatever. But I just think let him at it. Like, I'd be of the view that if now is not the right time to give youth its chance with the Irish rugby team, we can stop having the conversations about it ever in relation to Ireland and the Six Nations. About it as I said earlier, I feel very deflated by the idea that it feels like our coaching ticket at the minute, and from how well you've summarised the scenario, I don't disagree with a huge amount of it. It feels like they're uber conservative, and I think now is the time to throw caution to the wind a little bit.
I think that there's a strong case to be made for that. I just feel that the Harry Byrne situation is being equated to Ireland's philosophy and the lack of creativity a little bit too easily. I think we need to take Andy Farrell at face value this week and accept that the Six Nations has maybe just come too early for Harry Byrne. Like, tonight is a really exciting... Tonight's probably going to be more exciting for Irish rugby fans than any of the Six Nations games. Let's face it. Actually getting to see the Byrne brothers actually getting to play together. And that's kind of exciting from Ross Byrne's standpoint as well, the lineup that Leinster have picked tonight. But if that game happens 2 months ago, and he puts in a couple of games after that and he's fully fit and he's proving himself, then you can equate the two. Then he's got a fully fit flying out half that he is neglecting to pick. The thing is, Andy Farrell says that he doesn't believe he's had a bad back. He hasn't played enough rugby. That is the reason why he's not picking him. It's not to do with the lack of creativity or the lack of balls in this Irish coaching team. That might exist, but that's not the reason for this.
Yeah. So look, I would be of the view that they've made a conservative pick. Now, I also think they've made a bad pick, right, in selecting Billy Byrnes, because there's way too many Byrnes and Byrnes at the minute. But I just think that actually Ross Byrne in some ways, and like poor old Ross Byrne, right? Like he's nearly 26 now. He has over 10 caps for Ireland. He's rock solid, if not necessarily, I think everybody can agree, in the Dan Carter mold necessarily. Jack Carty, as Brian O'Driscoll outlined, is very much more of that. I'll take the ball to the line a bit more and a bit more of a cutting edge about him. He's very much, and I don't want to underplay his prowess, but like he's steady Eddie, right? But regardless, rural Ross Byrne must be thinking, like, I've got my brother about to ruin my Leinster career and maybe my Ireland career, and now I'm back up to this guy. I just think that, like, how, you talk about sort of instilling a bit of confidence in a player. Ross Byrne must be thinking, like, and like he comes on and he does a really good job for Ireland, and he that's the sort of player he is. Jack Carty,
I'm with you.
You can make the case for Jack Carty, like he's a bit older than Ross Byrne, even same sort of experience profile, as you say, playing good rugby for Connacht, bit more of an edge about him. Like, so I'm not hanging my hat on Harry Byrne. I think it would be unbelievable. I'd love to see him and Craig Casey get a lash against Italy. I don't think we're putting the result in jeopardy by starting those players either. I think that, like, we've seen enough of both of them. They can play rugby. They are good players. They are the future of this Irish rugby team, and so it's only a matter really of when. And I think now.
I'm with you on Ross Byrne. I feel sympathy for him with the way the last couple of weeks have gone, that he's the forgotten man, and the fact that his brother is being spoken about everywhere doesn't make things any easier. The thing is, what is the rugby calendar going to look like later on this year is something that we actually just don't know. And this maybe strengthens your argument. Is there going to be enough of these Mickey Mouse tests for Craig Casey and Ross Byrne to start together, especially on the lines here? This isn't going to be an ordinary 2021. Like, this is not the way it looked. This isn't the way it was in 2017, for example. But that's the parallel here, actually. A further parallel with the James Ryan thing is that was a Lions year. That's your opportunity to put your hand up as a debutant when the test players are away playing somewhere else, or who've got selected for the Lions. So maybe it doesn't look that way this year, and maybe there'll be less opportunities, in which case, obviously, the Italy game takes on far more importance in terms of blooding players. But I still think the importance, and what we do know, is that there is prize money on offer for this year's Six Nations. They want to finish above Italy. They need to beat Italy. They can't afford to get the wooden spoon. They need to finish as high up in this table as possible, and that's all they know. And they need to try and win this game. And starting Casey and Harry Byrne, who the head coach believes not to be fully fit, is just too big a risk, especially given the recent information. Just to briefly mention Roland O'Gara's column this morning, actually, because he's separated Murray and Sexton here, which I think is the right way to think about this, where the Craig Casey conversation should be about, can he become Conor Murray's out half, Conor Murray's backup at the next World Cup? Whereas when it comes to out half, the conversation should be about who will Sexton be backup to. And I know Ronan O'Gara said that on the show before, but he's going one step further in the Examiner this morning and saying it should be separated, that the Murray thing is a far different conundrum altogether. So the key is, when can we have a look at Harry Byrne playing beside Conor Murray? And that's when they'll get a real idea of how good the out half is. And that should go for every out half. That should go for bringing Jack Carty back into the team, if that ever happens. If any of the young Munster lads get an opportunity, that should happen. O'Gara, by the way, is projecting a Carberry, Harry Byrne and Sexton axis in 2 years' time for the World Cup. Sorry, Ronan O'Gara says management is probably projecting a Carberry, Harry Byrne, Sexton axis. So that's how he sees it going over the next little while. And if he's right, then Harry Byrne's going to get his chance. We have to take Andy Farrell at face value this week, saying he's just not ready for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I'd just lash him in there on. Do you know what I would love to do? And like, there's nobody closer to it than Andy Farrell and Mike Catt, right? So it's not necessarily a fair comparison, but I'd love to anonymously speak to 10 head coaches at whatever level you want it, like a high, let's say European Cup level, and get them to do an Irish depth chart and see how far down it Billy Byrnes actually is. I mean, outside of Dan McFarland, I think that he's certainly not in the top three, I don't think. And I know that aspect of that is hindsight, but we'll see what happens with the team selection next week. I'm desperately hoping that we're starting to look to the future, but we shall see. It's gone 8:10 on this Friday morning. We've loads still to come. We're going to talk plenty of football upcoming between now and 10 o'clock. We're going to cross live to Australia. We're going to catch up with Cora Staunton and some other little bits and bobs as well. So it is 8:10. You're watching OTB AM.